This is the website, The Way, the Truth, and the Life. This is for the website, The Way, the Truth, and the Life. This is an introduction to the Roma or Gypsies, as I've incorporated them into the website, The Way, the Truth, and the Life. This is Friday, the 19th of July, 2013. What have I experienced with the Roma? Well, it started as a child visiting my mother's parents, the Peltons in Winburn, Pennsylvania. The Gypsies, as they were called, came through about once a year. They would come to the back door. They knew that my grandmother would give them something. She always did. And that's all I had from my youth. And I heard many stories in school, Egyptian or all kinds of things that didn't come together. And then going to Russia twice a year for the last 13 years, there's always Roma at the airport, women with a baby and asking for, they mainly want money nowadays. They came to our apartment there in the Caucasus Mountains, and women, and wanting something. Olga gave them some clothes. We're in a second floor apartment, and when we went downstairs, the clothes were laying there in the hall. They didn't want clothes, they wanted money. And at the market in town, women and their children, one baby carrying a baby and a couple of young children, 4 or 5 years old, running around, maybe a little older. That's all I experienced personally, but to learn the origin, there's been a great deal of insight in the last 10, 20 years. Before that, too, it started with linguistics and gathering information linguistically, and then genetically. And now it's clear that the Roma migrated in a couple of waves as Muslims invaded what's now Pakistan, India, and that area. Those areas were Christian, Buddhist, Hindu before the Islamic invasions. And distracted a bit. Some of the northern areas were pagan. That is north of the Himalayas. But the Mongols converted to Islam and invaded. The Turkmen converted to Islam and invaded also. But so it turns out that the majority of the Roma are the Indian warrior class that had fought against the Muslim forces and been forced off their land to the point where they're a few generations, and they just drifted off and came to what was the land of the 7 churches first, Christian area, where it was safe. And the thing that makes this so interesting to me is the background of the first 1,000 years. That was about 1,000 years after Christ that this immigration took place. So they've been roaming around for about 1,000 years. And there's an interesting background of Christianity around the Black Sea that has been published by a professor from one of the universities in Turkey. And it shows there was a Christianity that had nothing to do with the organized church. It was directly from Peter and Matthew and Paul, Peter and his wife. I don't know whether Matthew had his wife with him or not, but they preached the gospel in the land of the seven churches, which the Black Sea is on the shores of the Black Sea, and spread. And the beautiful part of this is that the caring for one another that exists in farm families, whether Buddhist or Christian. Farm families value their children because that's who's going to work with them, and children do work with their parents. They want to. They enjoy it, the fellowship and the caring and the working together. And then in this environment also is respect for elders. So in these environments around the Black Sea, the Roma found a nice haven. As 1,000 years earlier, Christianity had found a haven. It was families thankful for the message of Jesus, where Jesus died that their sins were forgiven. They didn't need to go to a priest. They could get their sins forgiven directly from God, and they could communicate with their source of existence. When I say God, I mean our source of existence, physical and behavioral reality, that there's nothing outside of God. Creation, in my belief system, is not magic, something out of nothing. It's hard for us to conceive, but space, matter, and motion are eternal. They're God's physical reality. And we're formed out of this material, this eternal matter. We are made out of God's stuff, God's material stuff, and we live in God's space, and we move with God's energy. And this all obeys the eternal, unchanging laws. But caring is something, in life, is something we bring to God's body. There is apparently more than what we scientifically understand, like in communications. There was a Russian experiment of a litter of rabbits taken from the mother while the mother was electronically hooked up in a laboratory, and the brood was litter, whatever you call the rabbits, the young ones were taken on submarines with no communication between the laboratory where the mother was wired up to monitor brain activity. And at various times, the litter was sacrificed. And back in the laboratory, monitoring the mother rabbit's brain, they could identify when the litter was sacrificed. There are other things, and I had one with my daughter Anna having to do, and this very hard for me to comprehend. It had to do with flipping a coin and having it fall onto the rug, and me saying whether it was going to be heads or tails before she flipped it, put it on the table, and then shoved it off onto the rug. And 5 sets of 25, and I had over 20 correct every time. This defies time and chance. Whether it's repeatable or not, I don't know. At that time, I had a very close affinity to my daughter Anna. She was visiting me. I had been divorced about a year earlier. Her mother divorced me and took my 3 children. And my daughter Anna was visiting me. Maybe it was a year or 2 years after the divorce, but a very painful time in my life. A joy to have her visiting, because even the visitation was interfered with most of the time. At any rate, this story of humanity and the development of humanity, the Roma are a very interesting part. We have written history from the authorities of the church, which leave out the home churches and that writing about the Christianity around the Black Sea from the records that were archived in Turkey, which was the Byzantine Empire, and the records accessible that this professor cited. And other information, it becomes clear that where Jesus said, where 2 or more are gathered in my name, I am with them. And this reality you can see today in the homes of the Hutterites, Mennonites, Amish, particularly the Amish, have home church. They meet in their homes with the family, in family love. And what Jesus said, where 2 or more are gathered in my name, I am with them. And this family caring, the relationship being so well developed in the farm family, for the most part, not that there aren't exceptions and cruel people that had farms, but you can find rebellious Amish, but they're the exception more than the rule. And what a joy to see the children playing and enjoying the life they have with a family and working together with the family, and many of them homeschooling. So at any rate, this idea of caring, and caring what gives meaning to life. And of course, the caring for children before they can walk or talk, the most important period of their life. And the Roma being an example of how this caring Christian type environment was safe for them for 1,000 years. Not always, and many times, especially when there was affluence, and the lords would persecute them. But the farm families, the Christian home farm families, were a safe place. So I view the history of the Gypsies as a very important thing, and I've spent some time. And I thought I was finished when I run across basically is a course by the Council of Europe on the history and literature, language and culture of the Gypsies, or Romani. So I spent about 3 weeks not modifying, but putting that in the format of my website to preserve it, so that if it disappears, as some good things have from the internet, it's there. It's part of an integral development to try and show the foundation that gives meaning and purpose to this work, this website, The Way, the Truth, and the Life, which is my life's work. So that's my introduction to the Roma, and I've gathered this information. The course is there, and a number of things that would give some insight into what's happening with Roma today. And one of the most important things is to understand how much harm Islam has done to them. It's not safe for them to go in a Muslim country, even they say they're Muslim. And that this thousands of years of interacting with culture from a different perspective, a different culture, an independent culture, but showing the difference between Muslim and Christian cultures, even, and showing the corruption with affluence in the cities and the landlords and the warlords, how they can persecute the Muslim or the Roma when they would be safe with the farms, but once there's enslavement of Christians and no longer independent farm families, can see the corruption of the culture. I hope you can find resources and information that are valuable to you finding meaning in life. Thank you. Regime change may work temporarily, but we've got to see the reality here. The genetic male hatred foundation of Islamofascism, of Islam, of the Quran, is a evil pyramid scheme, world domination, theocratic cult, and it needs to be recognized. The Quran is much more evil than Mein Kampf, and that needs to be recognized as such, that that's the problem, and stop letting children be indoctrinated. Whether even the Indian religion that teaches caste system, how evil. Let religion be a personal thing between a man and a woman and their source of existence. That's their personal business, not a public matter at all. Number one. Number two, the female genetic hatred and resentment spawns a whole different world. The modern thinking in the Western world is now use women's liberation against Islam. Well, women's liberation and socialism has the women's genetic hatred in it. Hatred for men. Killing their babies is demanding this freedom to abort their children. And the abuses that go on, that if given the freedom, it's unbelievable. But that's the socialist women's liberation built on the female genetic hatred and resentment. Resenting their children because they have the knowledge that genetically that the child was caused by the rape. That's a problem that women have to deal with, and we need a civilization to help them deal with it. That's a whole nother thing. The great apes don't murder their babies. They nurse them until the second molars, many of them. That's the equivalent to like 6 years old. and they don't engage in infanticide. So let's get down to business here. Abraham made a separated people that didn't kill their babies. He set the example of sacrificing an animal, and that went on, not sacrificing their babies, and they went through the period in Egypt where they built a community that came out of there, and Moses gave them the 10 Commandments to make a civil society of law and order, that children were safe and everybody was safe, that people were held responsible, and there was due process of law. And then he created a priesthood that made a cult to indoctrinate the boys, that this cult could go on protecting children with robot behavior, and they did, to justify exterminating tribes that did child sacrifice to Moloch, and attacked and murdered other tribes to make it a safe place for humanity. It became a cult, indoctrinating the young boys that they had no individual capacity for individual sovereignty. Their development was determined by their indoctrination before the age of reason, rather than growing up like a child on a farm experiencing nature reality. And a caring family, that many of them have a caring family. That's another thing. But Muhammad learned that they used the rationale of a God to justify killing other people that didn't serve their value system. And he made his value system the latest and greatest prophet. And if you joined him, you got women and booty. And it's been going on ever since then. And he wrote this book and had a surah that the later things, he had respect for the Jews, thought they'd serve him at first, and he prayed towards Jerusalem. Well, that all changed later on. There are nice surahs in there, but they don't mean a thing. Read the surah of abrogation, where he changed his mind, and Allah can send a new, and whatever the latest one is important. And then the deception of the non-believer. The surahs are mixed up so you don't know. You can go to my website, thewaythetruthandthelife.net, and go to Islam in the background. And in the Islam, the Qurans are there, and the one standard order and the order of precedence. Or you can go to the University of Michigan or other places and find these things too. But the cult is the problem, not regime change, cult change. And I would recommend that religion be encouraged as a personal matter, that this hatred is part of human nature that we need to overcome with caring. And the development of Jesus as the Christ, who died to open up direct communications between every person and their source of existence, not an institution or a priest between you and your source of existence, but a personal relationship. Let's do away with the priests. Let's do away and start respecting families and the maternal nursing bond. Look at the great apes and the female's ability to care for the young. And let's start building homes like, look at the Amish. Not that there isn't rebellion there, but they don't get murdered. But look at the wonderful culture that the Amish have, that has persisted, and that value of the farm family, of the family being together in that care. I'll show you a little clip of that before we leave.
Their ancestors were Swiss mountain farmers from the canton of Bern. Already a stubbornly rural and tradition-loving people, they sidestepped the priesthood in the Reformation of the 1520s and began to read the Bible and meet in groups with lay leaders. In simple response to the teachings of Jesus, they abandoned warfare, refused to take civil oaths, and made baptism an act of voluntary adult commitment to the church. What the Amish lose in speed, they gain in fellowship. Work, under the right circumstances, is as enjoyable as play. Shared work is, in many cases, the Amishman's recreation. A tractor is allowed for belt power, but not to pull equipment in the field. That would be crossing an invisible technological line that the Amish define for the sake of their community. They sense just how much change their community can support without coming apart at the seams, by getting onto the uncontrollable escalator of progress. By resisting technological change, or at least slowing it down to controllable speed, the Amish also keep their old people from becoming obsolete as fast as the machinery of their youth is outmoded. Maintaining simple ways of farming lessens the distance between the generations. Shared within the family, hard work becomes a seasonal ritual. You've done it before with your parents, and you'll do it again in the same way with your children. Greater speed and size in their implements might eliminate some labor, but the Amish find their happiness and meaning in labor, rather than in escape from it. So much of what seems different about the Amish is only their continuing to practice what everybody used to, long after almost everybody else has stopped doing it. By not forgetting the art of the windmill, the Amish preserve for the rest of us a visual link with our own pre-urbanized past.
I need to remind myself and you of something that is not generally part of the academic history, having to do with Islamic invasion and minority groups like the Jews and Roma. In fact, the Jews were administrators in Spain and mainly converted to Islam, and besides assimilating into Northern Europe and academic world there with their intellectualism, many Jews, after the Reconquista of Spain, Portugal, many fled to Turkey, to Muslim Turkey, because they had a separate status in ruling over the Christians. They had a preferred status. And it turns out the Roma did also. Many were called slaves. They were taken as slaves, and given special status with the Turkish military, and were part of the. Many of them were part of the Turkish military in their rule over and conquest of the Christian areas in southern and eastern Europe. This is an important part to remember. What I find is the reality of farm family caring, generational caring, a great source of a caring religious expression, whether Buddhist or Christian. You find them in farm areas, and this was true of early Christianity in the Black Sea, but it had nothing to do with the organizing of religion under authority figures. Remember, Jesus died at the hands of the priests. And it says when Jesus was crucified, the veil in the temple between the Holy of Holies and the people, that only the high priest could go through this veil. You can read about that, but the priesthood that the people had to go to have communication with their source of existence. And it says when Jesus was crucified, that veil was torn apart. The symbolism is that Jesus gave everybody access to their source of existence. They didn't have to go through a priest, that they had a personal relationship with their God through Christ. And this caring for the ground, caring for a physical existence that exists amongst farmers. Now, it's a different nature amongst herders. Now, that's a separate area that appeals to a different worldview from historical genetic sources of conquest and survival. But you everywhere find conflict between the farmer and the rancher. The rancher wants to just take his herds, whether sheep or goats or cattle or whatever, to where the grass is. And now on comes the farmer and puts up fences, and they can't go there anymore, and they have conflict. That's historical. And the philosophy of God justifying you doing what you want to do and taking women and booty in the process of conquest appealed to this earlier hunter-gatherer and to the rancher type of experience. So the Islam appeals to the desert wanderers and the ranchers, and that's the rationale that they can do what they need to do, and nobody can mark off land that they can't take their herds to. Well, that's just background reality. That much is not available in the history. History was written by the intellectual class of rulers, and affluence degraded ability to care. It degenerated into narcissism. The same thing going on today through daycare. The lack of the mammalian nursing bond and the intimate family caring leaves autism, narcissism, homosexuality, sadomasochism, depending on the level of caring that the child received, especially the first 2 years. And affluence brings wet nurses and babysitters. And socialism brings the same thing. And destroys the family caring. You might be the most caring person in the world. If you're not with your baby, that's neglecting them of their parent. And the reality that a child knows its mother's voice from birth and gets relaxed with that, and any other woman or man, their voice tends to cause stress. So that's just part of the reality. Of course, not interacting with the baby is one of the worst forms of causing severe brain retardation during those early periods when nerve growth factor is present. But I am including in this history of Roma, interjecting in this course in the Council of Europe, just goes by what they could get their hands on to reference in the literature, but they didn't include, this is the way the Jews don't include how they were part of the oppression of Christians in Spain. It doesn't include how the Roma were part of the oppression of Christians in the Ottoman Empire. But the slavery came from Islam. The slavery that existed in Eastern Europe was instituted by the Muslims during the Ottoman Empire and taken over by the Christians. But that's not the, they don't have that part of the history, because if the Roma history were told truthfully, the Roma were sellouts, many of them, to the Ottoman Empire, and were found. You can read from the Wikipedia parts. I'm adding two elements of Wikipedia to that statement of history to help give some insight. That, and the other main thing is the early history, which was never written, that as early as the 9th century, Roma were escaping Islam into Byzantine Christian areas, and the large history is not written. It wasn't a literate people. Early Christianity was word of mouth. This is another thing that people don't understand. Lack of a written history does not mean a lack of culture and depth. Storytelling and Christianity going by storytelling is a very strong culture. This early culture, from the time of the apostles, especially the Black Sea, and it spread over into Europe, the destruction came with the destruction of the family farms with the warlords. And that earlier history that gave it a safe place for the traveler in the Christian farm areas was not a written history. There's references to it, as I've mentioned before, by this, the references came to my attention through this Turkish professor that wrote on early Christianity around the Black Sea. And that this is all available for you to look into. At any rate, I wanted to make this edition about the corruption of history by both the Roma and the Jews, because they were ended up in a majority Christian environment and had been part of the oppression and betrayed Christians and worked with and served the Islamic authorities in their domination of the Christian and their collection of taxes and their sending young women to the harems. And you can read about these things. Okay, let's get on with it. I need to include here a wonderful facet of the Roma, and that was the closeness of the family and the care for the children. within the Roma communities, many of them, for women to be topless, the same as men, was not an issue. Breastfeeding was normal, and to have a woman with the breast uncovered so she could breastfeed was normal, as it is in some areas of present day, and some women are willing to resist the women's lib hatred for women openly breastfeeding and going to 3 and 4 years old. Believe me, you can get thrown out of church for talking about breastfeeding. I was. You can get thrown out of the academic environment for talking about the need for the maternal nursing bond. You can lose any election by advocating the child's right to that mammalian nursing bond for a few years, and the mother with the child 24/7. At any rate, the Roma have the mother with the child 24/7, and they breastfeed. And one of the reasons that the Roma have such a history of a pleasant nature, yes, they would take whatever God provides them, and God owns everything. So they can have it. If it's there, they'll grab it. And yes, there is also manipulation and thievery and deception. But the family unit, why could the Roma exist as a culture for 1,000 years? We don't have a true history of the early time with the Christians as they escaped Islam. There was no writing with these people. There were just scant references here and there, and not anything that you're going to find a academically recognized history of. But the reality is the Roma had loving family caring, the same as the family farm. And this are the areas that were safe to travel in. So, wonderful example of mother with child for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years. That's the way it should be. And homeschooling. All right. That's the end of this introduction.